So welcome to the course. This is all about getting you started with Bootstrap, the bare basics from the beginning, assuming you've never used Bootstrap before, maybe haven't done much website design before either. We're going to look at how to get started with Bootstrap and how to do some basic layout work. So we'll be trying to recreate something like this example that's been provided by Bootstrap on the website. We're putting a nav bar in the top, some hero content in the middle there, and having a look at how cards function. So you need to have Visual Studio Code installed for this tutorial, but you won't need any other technology. You'll be learning about including Bootstrap CSS and JS bundles. We'll be using CDNs to serve that up. You won't have to host it yourself. We're looking at basic Bootstrap layout principles, applying some simple styles to text, and also looking at padding and margin. So let's get started. So we'll get started on the Bootstrap website. It's the official website's getbootstrap.com. This is built by the creators of Bootstrap, and I'll put that link in the description below. We're going to head into the docs section. There's a button there, read the docs, and we're going to have a look at what all this code means. So you're into a blank folder, and once you're in that blank folder, what you'll have to do is right-click and open with Visual Studio Code. And once you're in there, there's a little button there for new file. We'll make a new file called index.html. Now, by default in Visual Studio Code, there's a plugin called Emmet. What you can do, if you put an exclamation mark in, you'll see it comes up telling us there's an Emmet abbreviation there. We can actually hit the tab button, and it puts the basic structure in there. Now, if you're new to this, you need to have the HTML opening and closing tags. You know it's a closing tag because it's the same as the opening tag. It's just got a slash at the end. We have some attributes here, language being English. The closing tag, it's just the basic tag there with the slash at the start. So inside of HTML, we have head. Head isn't displayed on the actual screen. It's information that's really important for the browser. We've got our title here, and we can pop in there simple Bootstrap page or whatever you like, and that will appear in the top of your browser window. I'll have a look at that in a moment. We've got the character set, and we've also got the default viewport information. That's really important for Bootstrap. We'll have a look at that in a minute on their website. Then inside body, that's the text that will appear on the website. So pop something in there and save it, and then we'll have a look at that in the browser. So back in your folder, if you right-click Open With and choose a browser of your choice, and you'll see it's now come up, and it says there the text that will appear on the website. And if you look up the top in the title, you'll see the title that we created. If we right-click and go to View Page Source, you'll see a raw version of what's been read by the browser. It's exactly what we just created. And more intuitive ways, if you right-click and inspect, you will get a much better structured version of that. Kind of like working in Visual Studio Code, kind of like a code editor. We can also get some information on the right-hand side. We'll get more into that as we go. For now, however, we'll go back into Bootstrap. We'll have a look at what they're suggesting we do. So we've got this basic layout that we've actually already created ourselves using Emmet in Visual Studio Code. So we don't need to worry so much about that. But what's really important now, to get Bootstrap to work, we have to include the Bootstrap CSS, which is the styles, and we have to include the Bootstrap JavaScript, which is for all the interactive components. There's a few ways you can do it. The easiest being, and this is all about getting started, is using a CDN. So a CDN, it's a server, and it's a server which is distributed across the world, and they will provide that those files quite quickly for us because they're distributed over the world using fast servers. If you have a look at the example here, we've got one in the head, and that's the CSS one file. So we'll copy that. We'll paste that in the head. And then we've got another one just before the closing body tag, and that's the JavaScript CDN. And that's a bundle. So we'll go back into Visual Studio Code and leave a bit of a gap in there. So down the bottom of the body, we've now got the JavaScript bundle. So what they've said further down is that bundle includes both the Bootstrap JavaScript and another library called popper.js. You can get them separately. We're just going to use the one combined bundle for now because we're trying to keep it as simple as possible. There are some cases where you may not need popper.js if you're not using particular interactive components, and you could probably save a bit of page loading time by not including it, but let's not worry too much about that at the moment. We've got that reference there. That's where the links point to. So if we go back to our page and we right click and inspect, you'll see that now under body we've got a bunch of styles coming in here from Bootstrap. That's out of the reboot file, and that basically means they're just sort of setting some defaults. They're making things look the same across different browsers. Every browser is going to look slightly different, but because of these reset styles that they're using, we can get a similar result just with standard plain text across different browsers. You notice there's a bunch of different colors defined here with some variables. We won't worry too much about that for now. So we've got our text coming in, which is great. It's changed the style ever so slightly. What we need to worry about now is looking at the way we're going to lay things out. So under layout on the Bootstrap website, we'll have a look at breakpoints first. A bit of a complex concept to understand if you're new to this. Basically, what they've done is they've had a look at different devices and they've worked out some sort of widths where things are going to change. So, for example, extra small, if the screen is less than 576 pixels wide, that's the point where things are going to change. So we've got small, if it's greater than 576, mediums greater than 768, and so on. These are defined points where, because the screen's getting smaller and smaller, you're most likely going to have to lay things out slightly differently to suit those screens. So we call that responsive design. And we're going to have a go at some basic layouts now. So we've got to start with containers. Containers the biggest layout component that we're going to use. So we'll have a go at a standard container first of all. Now, you've got to use the class of container to get it to work. We've got some different options here. We're just going to worry about container and container fluid. Today's tutorial. A div is a very generic tag that we use. There's also span, but span's for something that exists on one line. Generally, you're going to be using a div. You can apply whatever class you like to a div, and it will apply styles to it. Think of div as like a container that holds something. So back in Visual Studio Code, there's actually a shortcut. We can do dot container, hit tab, and it creates a div for us. You can enter to make a new line. So what we can do is we can pop our text in there. That's not going to help us so much, but things have changed slightly. If you've got the inspector open and you put your mouse over it, you'll notice that we have, if you scroll right to the bottom, we've got some margin happening on the outside of our div. We've also got some padding, and that's just the way that Bootstrap sets it up with container. Container fluid is slightly different. And as you resize the window, you'll see that things start to shuffle around a bit. We'll learn more about this in a minute when we start applying some colors and when we start using some rows and some columns. So back onto the Bootstrap website, head down into grid. And the first example we've got here, it's not truly a grid, but first example we've got here is we've got 3 columns. And the way it works is we've got a container happening. Let's not worry about text center yet. We've got a row inside the container. So it's a whole row for the 3. And then inside there, we've got our 1, 2, 3 columns. So we'll have a go at recreating that. So what we'll do, we'll get rid of that text. Starting on the left-hand side, we'll hit tab once to come in, 1 indent. We'll type in .row and tab, then .col and tab, and then you can put the text in there of column. Now, we'll add some colors in a minute. Back on our example, you'll see we've got some color in there. The way color works is if we scroll down, under helpers, you'll see color and background. So we've got a class here of text-bg-primary. It's a bit of a combination there. We'll just go with that for now. And then we'll grab the next one as well, text-bg secondary in a minute. So we'll grab that, copy it, and next to col, we'll put it in a space. And we'll see there we've got just the 1 column. We'll refresh it and you'll see how if you hover over it, the whole container is 1 column. The white parts on the side are actually the margin. The padding itself is actually inside the container and it's what's pushing the text across from the left. You see the text isn't hard up against the left, and that's because we've got padding and we've got margin on the sides. Margin exists outside, whereas padding exists on the inside. This will become more apparent as we go. So we'll go about adding in some more columns and we'll change the color of each one. We'll use secondary and then success to get the different colors happening. So we've got our basic row happening there. What we'll do is we'll highlight it and we'll duplicate it 4 times, and we'll change the next one to secondary. Then we'll go to success and danger. We'll look at a better way of styling this with a bit more flexibility in a minute. We'll save that and we'll have a look, and then we'll start doing some modifications for responsive design, and then that will let us then move into setting up the example. So we'll refresh that and you'll see we've got the 4 columns happening. They get bigger, they get smaller. They get to a point where when things don't fully fit, they get pushed onto the next row, which is kind of good in a way, but we don't have much control over it. It's happening on its own there. Eventually it goes down to 1, but we've got very little control over that. And if we had text in those boxes, it would be a real pain trying to get it to work properly. So if you have a look at columns on the Bootstrap docs, got some examples here of how we can have at different breakpoints different widths. Now Bootstrap works on a 12 column system. This example here is saying normally the column is going to be 6 units wide, which is half of 12, but when the screen is small or larger, it's going to be 4 out of 12, which is a third. I think the best way we should do it is when it's really narrow, we'll just have the 1 column. Then when the screen gets wider, we'll have 2. And then when the screen's really wide, we'll have 4. So the way we'll do that is we'll hold down the Alt key and click on all of them. We'll do col-md-6. So what that's going to do is at MD or larger, it'll be half of the screen, whereas below MD, it will be the full width. And put in a space, col-LG-3, and that will put 4 columns across the screen. So we'll save that and we'll have a look. We may as well number them while we're at it. So column 1, column 2, and 4. All right, let's have a look. So we've got R4, that's at LG and wider. And then as we narrow down, we've got our 2 columns, and then we end up with the 1. Let's have a look at a couple of things we can change around here. Back at containers, the 2 main containers we're worried about are the standard container and then container fluid. Let's have a go at container fluid. Have a look at the difference. So we simply just change the class to container fluid. And you'll see it's the full width of the screen now. It's a fluid container. That container is automatically staying the full width of the screen. No matter what width the screen is, the container expands to fit the screen. Your standard container has notches in it based on those breakpoints. We've still got the breakpoints happening here with our column widths, but the container itself does not use any breakpoints. It just is quite fluid. Let's have a quick look at how we can change the background color and the text color independently. So on the Bootstrap website, under helpers, there's color and background, and that's a bit of a combination, and it is quite a good, quick way of doing it. It automatically gets you a contrasting color. If you go down to utilities and then background, we can set the background colors separately. And in this newest version of Bootstrap, there's quite a few options that are available by default. You can customize this by changing variables, and even better, you can customize it by changing the SASS source files, but they're much more complex topics to look at another time. So what we'll do is we'll just grab the first 4 here, for example, and we'll pop those in. In BG secondary. And it's just a case of spending some time practicing and getting to know these classes. So we'll save that, and then we'll go back and fix up the text color. So we've got our background colors changed now, but you'll notice that some of these text colors aren't so good. The primary subtle and secondary subtle, not too bad with the black text, but the black text isn't working too well with the primary and the secondary. So back on the website, head down to colors. Colors relates to text. And you'll notice again, we've got some options here. Some of the more basic ones are text white. Text black is the sort of default color. And we've got all the basic color variables there as well. To keep it simple, I'm just going to use text white. I'm only going to apply it to the BG primary and the BG secondary. You don't use a dot when you're applying classes to divs. If you're working in a CSS file, you would. So we'll save that and have a quick look at how it looks. So much easier to read now. As you can see, it was much easier working with those presets, but like I said, you are learning to have a bit more control over what's going on. So now you've had a good chance to learn about the basics of the Bootstrap grid system and applying classes to divs. We'll have a quick look at this example here and have a look at how we're going to set that up. The basics of it is we'll have a container for the navbar at the top, a container for this hero section here, and then a container for the cards. You'll notice that the cards don't go all the way to the edge of the screen, so it's definitely not a fluid container. But you may need a fluid container for your navbar depending on how you want it set up. In this case, it's not fluid. We'll try doing it more like this, and then we'll have a look at some modifications at the end. So under components, scroll down to navbar, and then we'll have a look at this basic example here set up for us. We'll hit the copy to clipboard button, and what you can do is you can highlight everything you've done, Control K-C to comment it out, so it's there to come back to. We'll do a dot container, and then we'll paste in the navbar text, and then we'll have a refresh and have a look. So we have restricted it, but the problem is that the background color isn't heading right across to either side. So back in the code editor, you'll see we've got the container that we just added. And if you look at the next line down, which is the navbar, we've got the class there of BG body tertiary. And that's the BG for background. So we'll copy that and we'll paste it into our container as well. And we'll save that and have a look. All right, so we have restricted the width of the navbar. We'll go in to inspect it. You'll see it's got the different breakpoints happening there. It then gets to a point where it snaps into a mobile navbar with a drop down. Because we've included the JavaScript, that's working great. However, I would like the mobile version to be the full width of the screen, and obviously we'd like that background color to extend across. So let's make a few changes. So what we'll do is we'll change the background color of the navbar to transparent, and it's got expand LG. We might change that to MD medium. So medium and low, we've got the mobile version. And what we'll do is we'll make it container fluid on the outer container, but we'll put container-MD in with our navbar. And what that will do is it will be a fluid container, but when we get to MD or larger, it will then turn into a standard container that snaps with the breakpoints. So that should fix it up nicely. Let's have a look. So when we're MD or bigger, you'll notice that we've got the restricted width there. The navbar is snapping to the breakpoints. And we keep going down to MD or smaller, and you'll notice that it's now a mobile navbar. There is probably a little bit too much padding on the side. If you right click and inspect on the actual navbar and click on the container and hover over it, you'll notice there is some padding on the left and right, that green part. What we can do to do a quick check, you can actually type into the inspector. We'll do PX, that means padding X, with X is the left and right, PX-0. You'll notice that's now tidied up and we've got a nice even gap around the edge. So what we'll do, we'll go back into VS Code and we'll add that PX0, and that's padding. We'll refresh and that's set up. Now you do have to check that as we reduce the width that it doesn't get too busy. Now if you are going to keep the search bar, and for example those 4 menu items, it just fits at MD before it snaps, but I'll show you what happens when it goes wrong. If we go down to our text, so we'll do drop down long text as an example. You'll see it starts to get a bit messy. We'll add a bit more text in there, copy and paste it again. It was just fitting. There we go. So you'll notice that things aren't working too well. And in that case, if you did have a lot of links in there, I'd be changing it from ND to LG, both that container and the navbar breakpoint as well. For this example, we'll leave it at MD. I don't normally use the search bar. For that reason, I find MD is a great breakpoint. So that's part set up now. Let's have a look at the rest of this example. We'll pop in a container for this hero content, and then we'll pop in a container for the cards, and we'll make sure we apply some background as well, background color. So we'll scroll down a bit. We'll do dot container, and then for the bottom part, we'll do dot container dash fluid. We're going to copy that same background, which is the BG body tertiary. So dot BG dash body dash tertiary, and inside there we'll just need a standard container. We'll get rid of the padding px0 on that outer container because that's not necessary. We won't be able to see anything yet. We've got to actually put some content in. If we right click and inspect, we can have a look at what they've done here in the example. This is a great way to learn Bootstrap. We've used some semantic tags here. We won't worry too much about that today. Got a container going on there. They've used text center the text, and they've used py, which is padding in the y direction, which is up and down 5. 5 meaning that's the greatest number that Bootstrap has set by default, and that's the green top and bottom that you can see on the screen at the moment. They've then used the row, and the LG5 is only applying that padding on LG and above. Currently, we're not going to see it. If we make it LG and above, you will be able to see that padding. There you go, it's coming up now because that's at LG or Y. So I'll have a go at popping that in. And what you could do is you could actually right click on that and copy the whole element. We'll just put in there in below. Semantic tags like section are a great idea. In fact, what you will do, you'll notice there's a nav semantic tag being used. We will wrap everything in a main tag. And then normally you would use a footer tag. We won't get that far today, however. So we've got our py5 text center container. That's good to go. And then we've got our row with our custom padding happening there. Now, MX auto is about margin either side. Now, auto means it's going to be putting equal margin on both sides to center it. And that's because we've only got one column actually happening inside our row, and that column isn't the full width. So what we're doing here is at LG, we're going to use only half. If it's MD, we're going to use 3/4, and we're filling up either side automatically to center it. We'll have a look at our fonts now. So if we have a look down here under content, go to typography. If you're using a H tag for a heading, it's already set up automatically, but you can actually use just H1 on a div if you like, if it's not actually a semantic heading. Also got the display fonts as well. So let's have a look here. So we've got font weight of light happening on H1. it's important that we order them from H1 to H6. So the first heading in the page is going to be H1, and then the second most important heading will be H2. You shouldn't be repeating those. If you did have a heading at the top of your page, like for the actual name of the site, that would be a H1, and in this case, this would be a H2 if you had a heading at the top of your page. You'll notice we've got that lead style for the text. And then we've got a couple of buttons in there as well, which I'll look at in a second. So under components, you'll see buttons. There's a heap of different options here. These are our basic buttons. You must start with BTN, and then after that, you can then modify it. So you can choose, say, BTN primary for your basic option, and then it goes on from there, BTN secondary, and so on. You'll see there's a heap of different options. We've got BTN and then BTN outline primary if you wanted that one. So what we'll do is we'll save what we've got, we'll refresh it, and then we'll start making some changes. So maybe we'll make this secondary action a BTN outline. So BTN-outline-secondary. You see we've got margin Y of 2, that's above and below. So refresh, there's our secondary one. Let's have a go at changing our font in the heading. So that's currently on their font weight light. Maybe we'll change it to, say, for example, H2 style. It's been changed. Another option that's really good in Bootstrap, if you go back into the text typography, is we've got the display settings. So maybe display 2, for example, could be a good one. And I think lead's a great way for important text. Lead's a great style to apply to it. Let's have a go now at the cards. So on the Bootstrap site, go down to components, which is card. And we've got this example here. So what we'll do is we'll copy that whole example. All right, so before we paste that in, we need to go back to the example that we created earlier at the top. That's we did MD6 and LG3. We'll have a go at that and we'll see if that works or not. So what we'll do, inside our container, we'll tab in once, we'll do a .row, and we enter automatically tabs in for you. We'll do .col-md-6 .col-lg-3, and we'll paste our card inside it. Now, we've got this inline styles. Inline styles generally are a bad idea in the first place, but the problem with this particular style, setting the width, is it's not responsive at all. So we'll back that out completely. The image will be broken at the moment, but we'll fix that in a minute. We'll insert an image. But for now, what we're worried about is just hitting save and checking that it actually works. So I'll refresh that, and you'll notice that it's lining up with the navbar. We'll go to inspect, and it's not going to work properly at the moment. Actually, we'll fix that up so that it's a full width, so it mirrors the navbar. So the way we do that, if you scroll back up to the top, you'll notice we've got a container MD happening. So we'll make that container-MD. And there we go, we've got our full width happening, and then it snaps in. We'll fix our image up and we'll put some more cards in. A quick Google search for a placeholder image. Just save one of those. So I've saved that placeholder image into the same folder as our file. I've called it placeholder.jpg. Yours might be another file, for example, .png, another file type. What we'll do now under source, we'll use / to signify the current folder, and then Visual Studio Code will actually show you what files you can choose from and you can click on it. For alt, we'll just call that placeholder image for now. If you like, you can put in a title. That's when you hold your mouse over. Alt's for screen readers. Obviously, placeholder image isn't going to be very useful for someone who needs to use a screen reader. Under class, we're also going to put in img-fluid. And I'm assuming you're very new to Bootstrap. And what that does is it automatically shrinks the image as necessary to fit. So we'll save that and we'll have a look. Because our placeholder actually isn't that big. We might need to find a bigger one. So we'll refresh that. And there's our card, which is working. And you'll see our image is a little bit low quality, but for what we're doing, you'll see how it's automatically shrinking and expanding to fit. So let's have a go at putting in some more cards. Normally, if you were programming this website, you'd actually generate these cards automatically. You wouldn't be repeating the code. But for what we're doing here, we'll highlight that. If you use Alt-Shift-F, you can actually prettify the code, format it. So it's Alt-Shift-Down. Now we've got to choose the column as well. So we're going to have 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll save that. And we'll refresh it. And you'll see we've got the 4 happening. And then as we shrink down, we get a 2. And then we go a bit more. And we get the 1. Now the problem we've got is there's no gap in between the cards. The easiest way to do that is we're going to add a bit of margin to the actual card itself. You could do padding on the the columns, for example, but much easier if we just do it to the card. So we'll just do Control Z. We'll get rid of that duplication, and then the card itself will do PX2. We'll give that a go. That's the problem with copying and pasting. 1, 2, 3. Is that going to work? No, it's got to be margin Y. Is what we actually need. There we go. So we'll copy that column. And now you can see we've got that padding above and below, which is great. And then it goes down into 1. Now you might want that to happen a bit at a smaller width. You might want to have, say at this point, you might want to have 2 cards. So what we'll do is we'll go back and we'll change it. Instead of col MD6, it'll be col SM6. And refresh it. And there we go. I think that's probably a better idea. So we've got 4, 2. At that point, we've still got 2. And then it's going to shrink down to 1. That's at the extra small breakpoint. So there you have it, a quick crash course into setting up Bootstrap using layouts, a little bit of margin and padding in there. If you get stuck with margin and padding, what you've got to do is inspect, and then if you hover over it, you'll see you've got MY of 2, and you'll see that there's our card, and we've got our margin, which is the orange part above and below. Margins on the outside, paddings on the inside. It is quite complex. It's going to take you a while to work that out. If you scroll down, it's got the diagram is there as well. We've got the border, which is not existing in this case, but the paddings inside the border and the margins on the outside of it. We've got their 8 pixels. And I've uploaded everything that I've just shown you to a GitHub repository. I'll have the link in the description below. What you can simply do is either actually open up that index.html file and have a look in there and copy and paste it out of there. Otherwise, you can click on the code button and download a zip file. In this particular case, it's probably easy just to copy and paste because it's such a simple repository. So I hope you enjoyed the course. Please, if you've got any comments, please leave them below. This is just an introduction. I'll have some more advanced courses coming up to help you continue in your Bootstrap journey. Remember to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell notifications so you get notified of my weekly videos. And make sure you hit that like button if you like the video. I'll see you next time.